Hello, mesdames and messieurs. This is Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I'm Sean, one of your co-hosts, with my other co-host, Sam. Sam, did you have a good weekend?
Great weekend. Great weekend. Your dad was in town. We were doing some work on the new house, doing a little bit of drywall, which is working with your dad, him doing drywall. It is watching a master.
Oh, God.
He's
from the age of 18, he's been doing this shit. So
I mean, he's making cuts, he's taking measurements, he's like, no, you got to do this and that and this and that, and it's just, I can barely keep up. I am unskilled labor. But so yeah, we're doing that, getting ready, and then a little look behind the curtain for our listeners out there. We were recording this on a Monday evening. Both Haley and I were off today for Juneteenth, and we utilized the time to pack up our house. So you can't see it, Sean, but right behind me off camera is a bunch of our clothes and bedding ready to be transported over to the new house. And this move is fully going. We had our daughter went to daycare for the first time. So that was
nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I think, it's a big adjustment for Haley especially.
What made you more nervous? Your daughter going to daycare or maybe going to doggy daycare? Do they give you like a live feed like maybe gets?
No, so there's no live feed for the for the daycare. There was a lot, when we were taking the dog to doggy daycare, there was a live feed. There'd also be daily pictures uploaded to Facebook. And we don't get that, but we do get a daily kind of summary of activity. And for the infants, there's not a whole lot that goes into it. It's usually just a rundown of their bowel movements. So,
right on.
Yeah. When they get older, I guess there's probably going to be a little bit more detail. But yeah, so it was a big day. This is a big week, but I'm happy to take the time and discuss season 2, the first half of season 2 of The Witcher. Sean, I know you have a lot of thoughts. And
Sean, how was your weekend?
Oh, well. Sean, how was your weekend?
You son of a bitch. My weekend was great. I went to the Oregon Renaissance Faire, and I'm holding my mug. Ooh. I would have just started talking about The Witcher season 2, but I wanted to show off my mug.
This is relevant. This is content. Yeah. This is content.
And I went to the fair, which was great. We drove, it was like 2 hours and 20-ish minutes south along I-5 to the great metropolis of Canby, Oregon, which is like 25, 30 minutes southeast of Portland. So yeah, not too far from Portland. And the fair was great. It was a good time. Unlike it's run by the same company that does Washington Renaissance Fair, but the Oregon Fair has trees.
Shade. What a concept.
But the cool thing, it was like the perfect weather for us. It was like 68 degrees and cloudy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it was so nice. And then you were in the trees. There were a bunch of, I bought some stuff. It was fun.
Did you sample the meads?
Oh, yeah. I got drunk on mead. Yeah, it was just overall, it was a really, really good time. And I'm so happy fair season is here. And now I'm really looking forward to Washington Fair in August, where I'll probably go all 3 weekends and drink and be merry.
Nice.
That's all I did.
Does the Washington Fair support camping?
They do.
Yeah. See, that is the thing. I for some reason thought that the Michigan Fair did that.
Yeah, and we talked about this when we interviewed the Scupper Monkeys and Wakefire.
Yeah.
But in the Michigan Fair would be great because it's very wooded. And you could get like an actual camping experience. With the places that we operate out of here, you're like in a field. And if there's one kind of camping I do not like, it's waking up in the morning at 8 a.m. when you're boiling hot in your tent because there's no shade, no cover, and it's just sun beating on you. Like, that's not fun for me.
No.
And I think that's pretty much what you get here. Now, the cool thing is you get access to fair, and Washington does like a after hours kind of party thing that you can get access to if you camp. And
that would be fun.
yeah,
That would be a lot of fun. That'd be because I think for the Michigan Fair, you can only experience that if you are a cast member, a performer, right? Because they'll hang out after hours, and I think many of them camp on site. Was that what we were discussing? I can't recall the from the conversation that we had about it before, but
yeah, I think Michigan, you can be on site if you're a worker.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then my only other tidbit update is that I am currently out of my new Oregon Renaissance Faire 2023 mug. I am drinking my mango mead that I bottled, and if I have any like great uncles that I don't know about who are rich and want to leave me all their money in their will so I can open up a meadery, that would be great.
So you heard it here first, folks. 2024, you will see a Kickstarter for Sean's meadery.
Yeah. Technically, I need a house first so I can
house first
produce it on my own. So yeah, included in my Kickstarter will be the funds to buy a house so I can make mead and have a business license and liquor license and all of that. But this would, like, I keep telling myself every batch I make, I just want it to be better than the last. And when I came back to Michigan for Thanksgiving, I think I brought you the lavender. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, there was lavender and there was another one too.
I think it was like a raspberry, maybe.
Yeah, some type of berry.
Yeah. But the lavender up until now has been, I think, my best one that I've made until I bottled this one. And this mango mead, I mean, I'm fine tuning. I'm getting better and better. And yeah, it's just so great to be able to drink your own product. Something about making someone with your hands, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I feel whenever I make bone broth.
Oh, God.
Which nobody likes, and which Haley makes me do outside because it stinks the house up too much.
I was at a tapas place yesterday, and I thought of you. Someone ordered grilled bone marrow.
Oh, have you ever had bone marrow?
No.
You lived in France for like a year, and you didn't.
I know. I've seen you suck it out of bones, you heathen, but
bone marrow is good.
Yeah, I will not partake. There's certain things that I'm like, I'd just rather not.
Okay, so real quick aside, and then we will get to the content that we were supposed to be talking about, The Witcher Season 2, Part 1. Not last, but was it 2022? Yeah, it was about a year ago. Haley and I went to Italy with our friends, and we went to a restaurant in Rome that Stanley Tucci went to. And
the Tooch.
The Tooch was live. I think it's called Armando's de Pantheon. It's right next to the Pantheon, which incredible experience to visit that. I got the organ meat sandwich.
Oh, God.
Liver, kidney.
Heart.
I think some heart. Maybe one other, like a thalamus or something. I can't remember what it was.
It better, like, if you're going to get organs, it better be like a minced. I want all of the organs just minced together. They
were chunked. They were discernible chunks in there. This was the most delicious thing I've ever had. Sauteed in butter with shallots and thyme. It was so good. And the best thing is when you order an organ meat sandwich, nobody's asked, "Hey, can I have a bite of that?" It's
well, yeah.
You want to eat tracks. Order the organ meat sandwich. Can't recommend it enough.
I don't think I would. The only situation where I would ever eat that is if I was at, what is it, Armando's?
Yeah.
If I was at Armando's with Stanley Tucci, and he was like, "Sean," in a sultry way, "I just went back and cooked this for you. Here's a Negroni and a organ sandwich." And I would have to at least take a bite, but that's the only way.
Well, I can't promise the Tooch, but I did see today, for those of you who don't know, in addition to being a fantasy nerd, I'm also kind of a Roman Empire, Roman Republic fanboy. And today they announced, or I saw a story that an area in Rome was 4 temples, including 4 temples and Pompey's Theater, which was the location where Julius Caesar was assassinated, have been open to the public after a brief restoration. So there's a reason for me to go back to Rome, in addition to having another organ meat sandwich. Sean, I'd be more than happy for you to come along. I can bring it back. I can do takeout for you, bring an organ meat sandwich back.
No, I got to go. I mean, I'm the only Catholic in our immediate family. I feel like I have to make a pilgrimage, do something before Francis dies.
When we went there last year, we were in Rome on the front end and on the back end. On the front end, we stayed in a neighborhood just a couple blocks away from Vatican City. And we went in at night. It was absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And we did not see, I think, is it Wednesday? He does a weekly address, I think Wednesday or Tuesday, during the week.
Sounds right.
There's a bit, so we weren't there for that, which would have been really, really busy, but absolutely phenomenal. So we have covered a lot of topics: Renaissance Fair, drywall,
you moving, yeah.
Meat, Rome. Let's talk about season 2, The Witcher, part 1. We're calling episodes 1 through 4 part 1. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to recap the episodes one at a time. And after the recap, Sean is primarily going to lead us off on a critique. Sean, do you want to give your overarching thoughts around season 2 so people know where you're coming from?
Yeah. So for the most part, for me, I remember hating season 2 because they deviate so much from the books. When I went back and rewatched a couple of these episodes, I'll start by saying that I didn't find myself hating it as much as I remembered, because I only gave it, when season 2 came out, I only watched each episode once. And then now that I'm watching episodes for the second time, I'm trying to kind of take a step back and watch it for what it is. And I have some general thoughts. Like, there's still decisions that I hate and don't make sense. And I'll compare them to the books, and we'll try to get to the bottom of what they were thinking. And hopefully you and I in a conversation can help me understand why some decisions were made and what their goals were. But I'm still very middle of the road on this season, and I think it could have been done so much better. And I do think that season 2 is what kind of led Henry Cavill to want to depart.
Yeah, that makes sense.
From the series. I'm still firmly in that camp, but yeah, we'll talk about each episode a little bit and then kind of get into what I liked, what I didn't like, and go from there.
All right. So let's jump into it. So season 2, episode 1, titled A Grain of Truth. On the battlefield after the victory of the Northern Kingdoms, Geralt and Ciri encounter Tissaia, who tells them that Yennefer is dead. Traveling with Ciri, Geralt stops to visit his friend Nivellen and discovers that he has been cursed into a beast by a priestess for vandalizing a temple. Geralt investigates the nearby village and determines that a Bruxa, a vampire, caused the villagers to flee. He returns and sees the Bruxa drinking Nevellin's blood. Geralt fights it and kills it, which lifts Nevellin's curse. Nevellin reveals he loved the Bruxa and did nothing to stop her from attacking the village, and that his curse stemmed from raping the priestess. Nevellin begs Geralt to kill him, but Geralt refuses. In Aretuza, Tissaia tortures Cahir for information on Nilfgaard. Fringilla has taken Yennefer captive and is heading towards Sintra, but their party is ambushed on the road. So, Sean, what did you think of episode 1 in season 2?
So, episode 1 of season 2 still is kind of knocking it out of the park for me, because it's still based off of those short stories that season 1 is based off of.
Yes.
And it's just a continuation of that adaptation. And I have no problems with episode 1 of season 2. And
correct me if I'm wrong, this short story is set in the time before the Battle of Sodden, like well before even is Ciri even with Geralt in the actual short story?
In the short story, I don't think she is.
Yeah, and for those of you who didn't know this otherwise, this is kind of Kowski's interpretation or adaptation of Beauty and the Beast, where you've got a guy cursed, he's in love with somebody. In fact, well, it turns out he's in love with a vampire. Anyway, but so you like this adaptation
of this episode, yeah. And if you look at season two is based on a short story from the book by Sapkowski, The Last Wish. It's the entirety of Blood of Elves, and then the beginning of the second book of the series, Time of Contempt. I think the fact that they were taking 3 of the Witcher books, turning it into one season, kind of led them astray a little bit on what they were trying to do. I wish they would have gone one book, one season. You know what I mean? And even kind of in doing one short story from the prequel series or prequel books and including it as the opener of this season would have been great, or still is great. But doing that and then leading into just Blood of Elves, I think would have been perfect. And then season 3 could be Time of Contempt. And then you have a 5-season, 5-book arc. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The episode 1 could have functioned really well as a kind of monster of the week type thing, where it's overall not connected to the overarching plot with Ciri and the major power players and the various kingdoms and Nilfgaard and whatnot. But it also gives a moral lesson, or kind of opens a moral question about choices and the consequences of choices, and the things that people will do for love or for lust or for whatever else. You could set up all sorts of different frames depending on how you wanted to kind of cast the rest of the season, which is something, I think they attempted to do that here to a certain extent. Other shows have done that effectively. For me, I'm with you. I thought episode 1 was great. I thought, season 2 is off to a strong start. If we're going to get more stuff like this, this is going to be good.
So my general thoughts on this episode, my notes, and this has nothing to do. This isn't negative. This isn't positive. This is just a observation that I had. The actress who plays Ciri ages so much between seasons 1 and 2 that for the longest time, I thought they found a different actress to play Ciri. But then I was like, holy shit, no, they must have taken so long to make the next season to start filming that there was just a huge age gap or age jump for her. So I noticed that. And then where we start to get a little off when we move away from the Geralt and Ciri and Bruxa and Nivellen.
Yes.
Fringilla takes Yennefer captive, which doesn't happen.
No, and Fringilla is not even introduced in the books until not in Blood of Elves. And is she even introduced in A Time of Contempt?
She might, because then we get into some of that.
I think she's introduced
ages and sorceresses
but she's not involved in that in the stuff that goes down in Thaned. She's introduced after that at the Lodge of Sorceresses when that's founded.
Okay.
So Fringilla, and this was something that I remember people complaining about season 1 when you had Fringilla involved from the beginning. People were like, what is she doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And
which I wouldn't have a problem with.
No, not at all.
Because then you're just taking a character and giving her more of a backstory, which wouldn't be so bad.
Correct.
But it's when you use her then to alter the story. Like if she would have led the attack at Sodden and then they lose and then she kind of licks her heels, like licks her wounds and goes back to Nilfgaard, and then we don't see her again until later, that would have been perfect. But then why change the story so much to where you're taking Yennefer captive? We're introducing the elves in some manner that I don't really like, and we'll get to that in episode 2. But yeah, so Fringilla, makes no sense.
And then was it revealed how Cahir was captured? Because where we left off in season 1, he beat Vilgefortz in a duel, which had, begs problems of its own.
I think they're just leading you to believe that after Yennefer does her big fire spell, the armies of Nilfgaard are utterly defeated.
Yeah.
Cahir has no soldiers left to lead, and then he's kind of overrun by mages.
Now, in the books, there was the stand at the Battle of Sodden Hill has kind of two parts, right? There's the initial phase where the mages kind of fight Nilfgaard, and that's something of a holding action until the northern armies show up, led by their kings, and then the northern armies actually there's just a regular battle that I don't think we get on the page, and we kind of get a little bit of this at the beginning of the episode, where I think people are kind of picking through the remnants of what looks like a battle between two armies, two like relatively equally matched armies after the sorceresses have already kind of done their thing. Yeah.
So it looks like the northern kingdoms have come in and kind of just clean things up.
Yeah. And that'll be important for later on. And that, we can assume that's why, or that's when Cahir was captured and why he was captured, because they were outnumbered at that point with after the huge fire explosion that Yennefer did, and then the northern armies show up and win the day.
Yeah. So more positives, we get way more Witcher signs. And that's one of my problems with season 1 is that if you don't know, Witchers have the ability to cast like a handful of spells, and they call them signs. And throughout the first season, we only get it a couple of times. There's the episode where he's trying to turn the princess back into her princess form.
Yeah, he's got to block the door and then kind of lock himself in the coffin.
In the coffin, he kind of puts a sign of protection. But we get more of that in this episode. There's a reference to the Wild Hunt, which is important if you've read the books and played the games. The Wild Hunt is a reference to a series of spectral, like, ghosts on horseback that are in the world of The Witcher, like they foretell of like the end of the world, basically. So important reference there. And then we get throughout these 4 episodes, there's a couple different references to the Wild Hunt as well. So not just in episode 1. We get Tissaia going full ape and shoving her fingers into Cahir's head.
Yeah, that was pretty fucked up.
To like extract information from him. The fight with the Bruxa was fucking cool.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of this episode, because that was like, oh, this is the Witcher. He's a monster hunter, right? Yeah. And he's hunting a monster, and it's a little complicated because of the relationship between Nivellen and the Bruxa. But yeah, that was like, okay, so this is what we're gonna get again.
He's a Witcher. Yeah. And then he drinks the potion too to enhance his abilities, which is fucking cool. And then finally, my last positive note was the Geralt and Roach moments. And we don't get those throughout the rest of the books here, or the episodes. But the relationship Geralt has with Roach, and this goes back to season 1, it's just, he wanders the world with no one but his horse. And his horse is the only thing he's really developed a relationship with. And I love those moments of him talking to Roach and like having a conversation with the horse. And we get it in episode 1, but we don't get it much more, at least in these 4 episodes. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have on episode 1. Do you have anything else for episode 1?
The one thing I will say is that I think I watched this episode before I had read or listened to the audiobooks for any of the Witcher series. And so similar to, I had a positive reaction to it. The one thing that it did, it started breaking down my understanding of how magic in this world works. Because I think prior to this episode, the magic that we have seen has been largely the mages, specifically Aretuza and Yennefer's story, Stregobor, the tiny little bit of Witcher stuff. And I don't even recall thinking at the moment that was anything that impressive. But in this episode, we start seeing like Nivellen can do very significant magic. Like he summons the meals and he summons the bathtub, and he, cheats at the dart or the knife throwing game. And so it started to, and then you kind of parallel this to what we get with what we get later with Yennefer and her storyline through this episode or through this season of losing her magic. Spoiler alert for anybody, we're talking about something that's been out for several years now. And so it kind of chipped away at my understanding of how magic works, which I don't think is good when somebody's loss of magic is going to be a major plot point. It was like, well, how can Neville do all this magic? He's not a mage. He's not trained. He's not a witcher. So it's like, so then what's the relationship between this and the rest of between magic and random people?
Well, I think Nivelling's is more that he's cursed, because the moment that the curse lifts, like you see the house go dark, and I think his connection to magic is also severed.
I don't know if that was that wasn't made clear.
It was to me, because he's like kneeling right after the Brux is killed. And then they kind of do a shot of him with his back to the house, and then the house goes dark and the shutters stop moving. So
I thought think that was like kind of more like reflecting his mood.
Well, no, I think the magic was tied to him being his werebore or whatever he was. But because more or less, it's like his curse was to have to live with this parasitic entity that was really only using him as like an eternal source of food.
Yeah.
And everybody else in his life has been killed. And he admits he tried to kill himself multiple times, even with all of this magical ability. Then he just kept coming back to life. So that was my interpretation of the episode.
Well, again,
I don't know if that's right, but
it's not like this the use of magic in this episode flipped my understanding about it completely. It muddled it, because it's obviously it's one of those things where the book offers a lot of detail that is missed in the show because of just the amount of time that you have on a page versus on the screen. And sometimes when then the details are used as motivation for a character, it becomes a little really, and the stakes aren't as effectively raised. And we're going to get into that, I think, a little bit more when we start talking about Yennefer in the subsequent episodes. So let's move on to episode 2.
Episode 2 is called Kaer Morhen. Yennefer and Fringilla are captured by elves who are digging near a ruined monolith. Their leader, sorceress Francesca Findabair, is having visions of a white-robed figure she believes to be the elven prophet Ithilien. Yennefer and Fringilla also dream of robed figures, red and black, respectively. The three sorceresses find a hidden passage leading to a magic hut. There they meet the Deathless Mother, a mysterious being who takes on a different form for each. Yennefer sees a younger Tissaia, Fringilla sees Emperor Emir, and Francesca sees Ithilien, and reveals the path each must take to achieve their greatest desire. The sorceresses are released. Fringilla joins Francesca to form an elven Nilfgaardian alliance. Yennefer calls them fools and discovers she has lost her magic. Geralt and Ciri join the remaining Witchers at Kaer Morhen. Eskel arrives late after hunting a Leshy. The Witchers are partying when their medallions start vibrating, indicating a monster is near. Geralt discovers Eskel was infected by the Leshy and has been transformed into one. Unable to control his Leshy side, Eskel attacks Vesemir, forcing Geralt to kill him. Realizing Kaer Morhen is not safe, Geralt agrees to train Ciri in combat. Now, can I just say woof with this episode?
And why is that?
So we get a couple things where we start to diverge a little bit. The elves in the books find a place that they kind of make home after the events of Sodden that they call Dol Blathana. And that's kind of where they create their new empire. After this episode, we're led to believe that Sintra has become basically Dol Blathana and is where the elves are all migrating to, based off an agreement with Nilfgaard. Now, there's an agreement with Nilfgaard in the books, but that's where Dol Blathana comes about. And it just seems like, why are you trying to shoehorn this Fringilla relationship in? And it just doesn't make sense. Like, there's so many times in the books where Ciri is like, oh, I want to go back to Sintra. There's all of my people are still there. I can reclaim Sintra and be its monarch, basically. But she can't now. Like that whole plot line is taken away because it's been taken over by the elves. So I didn't like that at all.
And then only kind of taken over by the elves, right? Because they're still later in this season, the elves are in Sintra or Zintria, but they're still kind of taking orders from Nilfgaard to the point where their like refusal to kind of follow through on parts of the agreement lead to serious conflict. In the books, Francesca Findabair is just made the queen of a place, and she's not wholly independent because she still has a
she still serves Nilfgaard,
still serves Nilfgaard, but she's not. There's not like at least to our knowledge, a bunch of Nilfgaardian generals and Fringilla there to kind of boss them around on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I did like to see the elves, though, because they're a pretty cool plot line throughout the entire series. We see Filavandrel make his return from season 1. He was in the episode with the goat, like the satyr. And at that point, he kind of gets the nudge to attack Sintra from Geralt, which is kind of interesting to see him come back. I really liked the choice of actor for Vesemir, like that old, wise leader was pretty cool. And then just the look of Kaer Morhen. Like, that's one of my favorite locations in the books and in the video games. And I thought they really did it justice, like a really beaten down keep with not enough people to maintain it because the Witchers have all been killed. And
it's cold and there are rats and
yeah.
The thing for me in this was the kind of like escalation of the Francesca Fringilla Yennefer storyline, seemingly like a lot faster because we meet Francesca in this episode for the first time ever.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the book, she's kind of a background character until, well, she's like consistently a background character, and her like she doesn't even come on to the fore until well into, I think, the time of Contempt that she shows up. Right? It's like she's kind of inserted earlier into, and this is one of the things about the changes from the changes from the books and adapting season 2. It's like some things are getting accelerated and changed, and then that doesn't allow other things the time to like breathe naturally.
Develop. Yeah. I didn't get until this rewatch through that the Deathless Mother that Fringilla, Francesca, and Yennefer encounter is the same demon that Vesemir talks about locking away.
Oh yeah,
like hundreds of years ago. Yeah,
it was like the first Witchers were contracted to fight her, right? And that was So
I missed that the first watch through. And I appreciated that in this episode, the tie-in there.
I like the Deathless Mother is a complete fabrication, as far as I understand, of the writers of the show. Doesn't exist in the books, doesn't exist in the video games. It is, however, very fitting for something that is like largely a lot of Slavic mythology were the inspiration, because she's got total kind of Baba Yaga hag vibes, right? Her hut with the chicken leg, and she feeds off of pain and suffering, which is kind of like exactly what you would read in the Dungeons and Dragons monster manual about hags. So like that whole thing, I liked the concept. I just think the execution kind of came out of nowhere, in a show about ostensibly The Witcher. We spent a lot of time with these characters, and in future episodes, the way that the Deathless Mother figures in just begs more questions.
And then my last part that was my huge negative is this whole, throughout the entire second season, the idea of these like monster mutations. And I just went, it's not in the books. Why even include it?
Yeah.
You could have just had a Leshy attack Kaer Morhen. Why do you have to include, they're mutating and they're doing things we've never seen them do before? It just it didn't make any sense to me. And my whole question is just, what does it do for the plot? what benefit does it have for the plot to mutate monsters to have them do things that our characters aren't anticipating them to do?
Yeah.
And you might not have an answer. And that's my question is I want the writers to come out and say, well, this is why we did this. But I don't have a clear answer for that. And it really bothers me because it's like, that's such a deviation from the book that it's, well, then why'd you do it? You have to have a reason.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of our conversation regarding things that happen in the Rings of Power and that kind of mystery box approach where, what's going on here? There's some sort of mystery and it's somehow related to what we're calling the plot. When you read the actual Witcher books, monsters play a relatively minor role.
Yeah, most humans, of they make humans out to be the bad guys.
Yeah. Which is, and most of the conflict is between humans, and it's really well done. There are political layers, there are personalities, there are all sorts of commentary on human nature, especially with some of the things that Ciri goes through and the arc that she takes in some of the middle books in the series. It's the monsters are secondary. The monsters are there to kind of contrast and kind of flesh out the world a little bit. They're not supposed to be these big mysteries. Mm-hmm. And then even in this, just jumping ahead to where this series goes, the monster kind of just like still kind of shoehorned in.
Yeah, totally.
There's a lot more focus on them in the episodes than in the actual overall plot.
Yeah, my two things that you made me think of as you were just talking were A, if the mutated Eskel was supposed to push Geralt to train Ciri like he does in the books, just have a monster attack and have Geralt realize that Kaer Morhen isn't safe. So he's got a trainer. That would solve that problem. And then B, the other thing is Vesemir brings up in particular that leshies can't reproduce. So if they're trying to say that these mutated monsters are finding ways to reproduce, the whole point of Geralt's Witcher storyline throughout the series is that he begins to figure out, and we talked about this with Three Jackdaws, it's like, just because it's a monster, do you have to kill it? And Ciri with episode 1 with the Bruxa kind of has that conversation with Geralt as well. And it's like, because the monsters are so limited in their existence, to me, that just furthers that internal conflict of Geralt. And if you get rid of that by just saying, oh, they're mutating and now they can reproduce, it's like, okay, well then he's just going to keep killing monsters. Yeah. And the whole the whole point of him being like, oh, I need to question my role as a Witcher and killing these things, then just becomes, oh yeah, they're reproducing. They're a problem. Let's kill them all.
Yeah, they're reproducing and they're inexplicably aggressive and coming after us specifically. So it removes all kind of that moral quandary around killing something just because it is strange. And that's a great explanation in the books for these monsters, is that there was this conjunction of the spheres and monsters came to the world from their own worlds. And so they don't have a natural place in the environment, a niche in the environment. And that is why they are monstrous. And that is why they are viewed as aggressive. And there's strange mythologies. I mean, a character who maybe we're going to meet in season 3, but is great in the books, he's one of my favorite characters in the books, is Regis, who is a vampire.
No, we've talked. He's my favorite character in the entire series.
Yeah, and those scenes are so great because you get this educated, erudite, thoughtful, courageous person who's also a vampire, and he talks about when he's 500 years old or whatever he is, and how he used to drink blood and used to get drunk on blood and kind of fly around drunk on blood, and all these really interesting perspectives of what the monsters do from the monster. And he and Geralt reach an understanding and he becomes an incredibly valuable member of the group. But we don't get that here. Instead, it's just oh, one of your friends is now mutating into a Leshy and you got to kill him. And to be fair, I mean, this is something I know people criticize. He's kind of a dick anyway.
Eskel
right?
sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the books, he's actually a pretty nice guy and he doesn't die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my thoughts on episode 2. Pretty much my main negative in this one is including the monster mutation storyline. All right, we'll read episode 3 for us.
Episode 3, What is Lost? Ciri continues to train in swordsmanship, fitness, and agility. Vesemir investigates the mutated Leshy. Yennefer makes her way to Aretuza. Tisaya informs her that her absence has aroused suspicions regarding her allegiance among the Brotherhood and implores her to lie low. Stregobor interrogates Yennefer until Tisaya intervenes. She later noted to Yennefer that she knows about her losing her magic. The Council of the Brotherhood decrees that to prove her loyalty, Yennefer must execute Cahir. During the execution ceremony in front of an audience of the Brotherhood of the Northern Monarchs, Yennefer releases Cahir and the two escape. A pregnant Francesca and the elves settle in Sintra under the protection of Nilfgaard. In Kaer Morhen, Geralt reveals to Ciri that she may have inherited magical powers from her mother. They track down the Leshy. During the battle, a myriapod, a centipede-like monster, appears and kills the Leshy before pursuing Ciri. Geralt kills the myriapod. Sean, what did you think of episode 3?
This is probably the one that I hated the most. Up to this point. Through the first 4.
Lots of questions in this episode. Lots of questions with not good answers.
Yes, and my main questions are this whole shoehorned plot line of Yennefer losing magic and having to kill Cahir. Like, none of it was necessary. Absolutely unnecessary. And it's hard to... I might have to just kind of put a bookmark here, and then we can talk about it when we do part 2, because kind of what we need to discuss with Yennefer right now, we can't really talk about until we get the resolution of the season. But honest to God, I just look at it and I go, why even include any of this nonsense with Yennefer, how she lost her magic, and what she has to do to get it back? Like, that whole plot line is just stupid. And then when you then talk about what you need to do to get back on track for the plot, it seems like insurmountable to me. Like, what would need to happen to correct it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and this is probably the Yennefer storyline is the biggest, to be quite frank, mistake that the writers made in season 2 because of what it should do to her relationship with all of the people that are important to the story. Mm-hmm. And I think, I think the explanation is rather simple. They needed something for Yennefer to do this season because she doesn't show up until, well, I mean, to be quite frank, like they needed to spend more time on the Yennefer, Geralt, Ciri, and Triss relationship. And the thing is, a lot of the stuff with Yennefer, a lot of what Yennefer would be doing in this season happens but it's only shown through periodic flashbacks in the books, right? We don't get a ton of contemporaneous time with Yennefer. So I think they needed something for her to do. They needed her to overcome some sort of obstacles and challenges, and what they came up with was, to be quite frank, really bad. Yeah. The whole, like, you lost your magic because you did it too hard, right? Like, there's
they kind of built that in with just fire magic kind of being this like faux pas, this forbidden thing. So even if you lost your magic because you did too much fire magic, I'd be okay with it. But the avenue they gave her for reclaiming her magic is what I hate. And it makes no sense for the actual plot of the books. And then to me, just makes it so it's almost impossible for me to like rationalize it and make it make sense in my head, how they can actually get back to the actual plot line of the books. Yeah. And we'll get to the Ciri, Geralt, Triss which they kind of cover in episode 4, which I think they did really well with Triss.
Yeah, this was not bad.
And yeah, just this episode in particular, not a fan. Then we get some more mutated monsters.
Yeah, I remember
for some reason this like random myriapod kills a Leshy and attacks Ciri, and it's just like, what the fuck are we doing?
Why it's shoehorning in the monsters because he's a monster hunter, right? Again, not using it to do anything that's. I mean, I hate to say this, but people don't. I have a theory that people don't really care about the monsters. They care about the human drama. Like the human drama is what makes things good, right?
That's what makes this series good in particular.
Yeah. And so why do they find it necessary to shove the monsters in?
Yeah, because we'll get to it with episode 4 with Dijkstra and the Redanians, which we just say their casting for Dijkstra was fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, I love that actor. Okay, the final thing here is the scene of Yennefer's execution of Cahir, and then the subsequent escape. It's just so poorly set up, right? It's just so hackneyed. Like, so you're gonna give a sorceress an axe, and she's gonna chop off his head, and instead she's somehow so good with the axe that she's able to like perfectly cut his chains, and then not only are they able to get away before anybody does anything to stop them, including like a bunch of mages
who can teleport,
who can freeze them, who can get them stuck in mud or do anything, literally anything. And at that point, Tissaia already knows that Yennefer lost her magic, so it's not like Tissaia would be worrying about what Yennefer, like opening a portal or anything like that. And if Tissaia knows, I'm sure Stregobor and Vilgefortz and the other really powerful mages would also be able to figure it out. And then we just happen to have two very conveniently placed horses completely ready to go, unguarded. It's just so contrived. And again, it's not like,
because they're forcing this storyline down.
Exactly. You didn't need, you wrote yourself, you painted yourself into this stupid corner completely unnecessarily. So yeah, episode 3, low point so far in the season. But let's go to episode 4.
Yeah, episode 1, super high point. Episode 2, a little lower. Episode 3, way rock bottom. Episode 4 is called Redanian Intelligence. Triss arrives at Kaer Morhen, having been invited by Geralt to help Ciri in magical training. Geralt, Ciri, and Triss investigate the origins of the Myriapod and Leshy, finding that they are connected to monoliths. Ciri confesses that she toppled the monolith in Cintra. Triss portals Geralt to Istrid, who is known for studying monoliths. Vesemir discovers that Ciri has elder blood, long thought as extinct, and rumored to be an ingredient in mutagens used to create more witchers, but the art had been lost a long time ago. Now wanted, Yennefer and Cahir escape to the city of Oxenfurt in the north, where a pogrom against elves is taking place. In Redania, Sigismund Dijkstra and Philippa Eilhart, spymaster and court mage respectively to King Vesemir, began to plot the seizure of Cintra. They recruit the imprisoned elf Dara as an informant. Meanwhile, Yennefer and Cahir discover that a figure called the Sandpiper, revealed to be Jaskier, is smuggling elves to Cintra. With Jaskier's help, Yennefer, Cahir, and Dara board the ship bound for Cintra. After Jaskier leaves, Yennefer finds that he has gotten into trouble. Now, more or less, I had fewer problems with this episode, and it's episode 3 that was the huge downer for me. Because with this one in particular, one of my slight negatives is that my recollection of the books, the Witchers contact Triss because they don't know how to raise a young girl.
Yes.
And she experiences her first menstruation and they don't know how to handle it. And they're like, we're out of our league. We need someone's help. So Geralt contacts Triss for that. And then while Triss is there, then they discover a lot of the magical things. They've kind of reworked it a little bit to where they contact Triss because of her magic. And then that leads to Triss discovering how poorly they're treating a young girl. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think it makes more sense to contact Triss because they need a woman's help for raising a young girl, instead of, hey, Triss, Ciri's doing some magic things that we need some help training her with. Because why wouldn't Triss then just turn around to the Brotherhood and be like, yeah, there's this young girl the Witchers have she's so magical they need our help or need my help.
Yeah.
I feel like.
And she'd also, why wouldn't she say, oh, she should go to Aretusa? And then also, if she's magical, I don't recall if it was, they got a sense that, oh, she's so magical that we Witchers who use a little bit of magic don't know how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. I think that the issue is that in 2021, when this came out, I don't think audiences would have been cool to have a young girl's first menstruation be a plot point in what is ostensibly a fantasy show. Right. In that sense, the book is very grounded in the reality of
a bunch of men raising a young girl.
And there's a scene in, it's not in this book. I think it's in the next book where like there is a whole thing about her virginity, right? And the importance of her virginity, because there's a unicorn, and in the mythology of unicorns, they only appear to maidens, and that's a really important thing. And subsequent books have series kind of exploration of her burgeoning sexuality as a relatively major point. Like, I don't think the show could get away with doing that, given one, the age of the actress, the age of the character in the show, because like much fantasy, royal princesses are married off at young ages, and that's a thing in the Witcher series, and they haven't really talked too much about that. So I think that they needed a different reason to get Triss there, and the one that they picked was fine, but still a deviation from the book.
There was a joke that they made that was pretty good. I liked it for the most part, but it was them making fun of themselves when Jaskier is trying to convince the dockmaster to get on the boat. The dockmaster is talking about one of Jaskier's songs, and he goes, yeah, but your one song is pretty difficult to understand until you realize that it's multiple plot lines. I don't know if you caught that.
Oh, no, I did. And you think that was the writers poking fun at themselves?
I think so, because so many people were confused about season 1 being multiple plot lines.
Well, the character who says that turns out to be a total asshole, right? He beats up that elf, played by the same actor who was in Downton Abbey. That's who I kept seeing I can't think of his name. Haley would know it. But I think that was the writers kind of sticking their finger in the face of the fans who complained about the 4 plot lines.
Well, you're kind of changing my opinion on that now.
Yeah, I think that was the writers being like, you're dumb and racist.
Yeah. So now I look at that and I go, what shitty writing? Because season 1 was actually good. And now season 2 is such shit. And I don't know. Maybe
season 3 will have Jaskier write a song about changing the plot to a really well-regarded story and how it's better than the original.
I'm all for the writer's strike, but I'm not in favor of the Witcher writers getting what they want. So,
well, I mean, I think we saw how things went when our friend Hank did not want to continue seeing this
story.
Their changes, and there was another story that came out that the writers actively disliked the base material.
Then why would you have them as writers for the show?
It's a bunch of, I mean, these are good questions, right? These are good meta questions of what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And, I hate to say it, but I don't want to sound too cynical here, but I think often we assume that because of the amount of time and thought that goes into the novels, and I think this is true for J.R.R. Tolkien, George R.R. Martin, is it what's his first name? Janusz Sapkowski?
Andrzej
Sapkowski. These novels, Legendarium, take years to write and to think about, and you know these characters intimately, and the things just make sense. I mean, if you look at George R. R. Martin right now and his struggles to finish his book series, it's because he is trying to do it in a manner that makes sense, that is good, that is beautiful, for lack of a better term. And I just don't think that the writers we have for this show, for the Rings of Power, for Game of Thrones, they didn't have the same level of talent or investment in the characters to really do it justice. But they think they're that good, and so they start making changes.
There's a little conversation between Triss, Geralt, and Vesemir, and Ciri a little bit as well, about trying to figure out if these mutated monsters are mage-made or not. And they discover that they're not, that they're somehow connected to this monolith that Ciri has destroyed. But I would have preferred that they were mage-made.
Totally. It would have given us it would have put more fuel on the fire of the coming conflict between Geralt and
mages.
The mages and one mage in particular, but
and them trying to get to Ciri.
Yes.
Like when they hinted at that and then didn't follow through with it, I was like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
Yeah, you have a great explanation. I mean, like, again, the monolith represents this,
like, and it also, it also would have gone away. It would have veered from the books, but it would have veered in a way that made sense. All of these different veers that they make from the actual plotline of the books, they don't make sense. And if they did, I wouldn't have as many problems. But when you look at it and you're like, and I asked you this question earlier with the Yennefer plotline, make it make sense to me. Like, if you're going to choose to go on these tangents with Yennefer, explain to me how it makes sense. And they can't. And then when you look at this particular plotline with the mutants, and they even bring up, oh, is it mage made? It makes sense to do that. With the plot of the books, you're going away from that plot, but then you decide to go in this other route, which is just adding bullshit to the main plot that doesn't make sense. So I got really frustrated with season 2. Yeah.
So
sorry to cut you off.
No. I think I was just going to reiterate the point that if you want to heighten the drama, the human drama, that is the reason that these stories are actually compelling. Make them mage made. Then we have a mystery. I mean, we have a great mystery it's coming up, right? Later in this season, about who is the benefactor of Ryan's, right? The fire mage that's coming after them all. And I remember that was a big mystery for me when I was first listening to the books of, like, who is his benefactor? Mm-hmm. Who hired him? And that thread continues throughout the rest of the books, when if he doesn't necessarily, or his character, who's I think Ryal's in the book series.
Who I think we get ranked in episode 5 of this season, I believe.
Okay, so yeah, we're not
quite there.
But yeah, you could use this tool of the monsters that, it's a show about hunting monsters. So if you want to increase that aspect of it, you can. But yeah, tie it back to the actual conflict that is motivating all of this. Instead, mm-hmm. You're coming up with, so it's like there's a life raft, right? And the plot has to fit on the life raft, or it's going to drown and everybody's going to die. Right. So you get all the interpersonal conflicts and the larger political stuff and the aspect of destiny and Ciri's bloodline, and all that stuff is trying to stay on the life raft. And then you're adding on top of it new things, and you're displacing the plot that's already there. So stuff is starting to fall off. Just tie it all together and you can have a more coherent, more dramatic storyline, but they chose not to.
Yeah.
Okay. The final thing, and this is actually kind of a similar complaint, is why do the humans hate the elves?
I think it's just based in racism. If you're going to go back to the origins of the story? Do you want me to talk about
Well,
like the
so it
origins of the
was
story?
somewhat rhetorical because in the show, or
The show doesn't give you a reason. The
yes,
books give you a reason.
the books give us and the books give us like the historical reason of the displacement of the elves and the persecution for the gnomes and the all the demi-humans. And we have a modern contemporary threat from the elves and the gnomes and the dwarves in the Squaretail.
Mhm.
And the Squaretail so far have not been in the show. So we get maybe a tiny little hint with Francesca and her brother character, right? But we don't see them attacking caravans. We don't see them coming into conflict with Geralt and threatening Ciri, which was a really great scene in The Blood of Elves, the book. And so we don't really understand why there would be a conflict to the point where civilian elves are being persecuted and made expelled basically from their homes and become victims of violence. It would make more sense and connect back to things that are overarching conflicts in the series if we had a Squaretail insurgency, and it wouldn't take that much to do it. You could establish a 5-minute scene of elves attacking a caravan of humans and then a little bit of dialogue. That would be enough to justify the pogrom in the minds of the viewers who don't have all that context, and set up things like what will happen theoretically on Thanedd with the conclave that's going to happen there.
For our listeners, just to give you a little background from the books, during the Convergence, elves were like the main inhabitants of this world that we live in The Witcher. And humans were part of the Convergence as well. And they just appeared in the domain of the elves. And over time, elves' reproduction is a lot slower. So humans were kind of able to take over this world and persecute the elves in return. So that's, if you're looking for some background, that's like a gist of Sapkowski's world. And if we're going to round out episode 4, they drop a lot of hints to the Netflix anime movie called Nightmare of the Wolf, which, if you're really interested in more of like the background and history of The Witcher, you should definitely watch that movie. It's like an hour and 20 minutes. It's not very long, but it details how witchers are made, why the Kaer Morhen that we see in this episode is destroyed, and why witchers are not able to produce more witchers, as Vesemir talks about in episode 4, revealing that Ciri's blood is elder blood, like elven blood, pure elven blood, that they use to make the mutagens to create witchers. So if you're interested in all of that, you should go and watch Nightmare of the Wolf. Maybe we'll do like a one-off episode on that movie as well, once we round out season 3, because that's a really good movie. If you're into anime, Netflix also really did a really good Sylvania series. I don't know if you've watched that.
I have not watched that, no.
But it is really good. But that's really all I have on episode 4. I'll say up to this point, like I kind of started with in our discussion, I remember leaving season 2 hating it. And when I rewatched these 4 episodes, I hated I hated episode 3, but 1, 2, and 4, 1 in particular I really liked, but 2 and 4 I was able to come away liking it more than I hated it. What are your overall thoughts on these 4?
I liked episode 1. I think at the time I was interested in what was happening. And this was, I was watching before I was reading the books. And I think to a certain extent, similar to my thoughts on the Rings of Power, if you detach it from its base material, it's okay. But when you have the base material to compare it to, it falls well short. The changes are obvious and inferior.
Incredibly short.
Yeah. And I will say in this one, in this season in particular, there are some changes that they do that within the season just still doesn't make sense. And we haven't yet, hit this fully, but the teleportation stuff really starts to wear, and not just the portaling, but the actual people physically moving across the map in seemingly very rapid instances. Like Yennefer and Kahir without magic are just moving around, and we have no sense of how far they are moving, right? And that really detracts, because it's confusing. It breaks some of the tension, or it releases some of the tension that you would otherwise be feeling. And I think it gets really bad when things like coincidentally people start running into each other, right? It's like, am I supposed to be impressed by this? It's because it just kind of falls flat. So there were certain things in this season that didn't make sense within the logic of the season and the show itself. But then when you compare it to the base material, it's just, why did you make these changes that were totally unnecessary?
Mm-hmm. But I do like the recurring joke of Geralt hating teleportation, because it makes him sick. And we get that in episode 4 when he goes to Eastrid, who a callback from season 1. This is a season 1 character, Eastrid. But when he gets there and he just has to sit down for a minute because it makes him so queasy to teleport. And that's in the books too. There's a lot of times where Yennefer's like, oh, we could teleport to this place. And instead, Geralt chooses to ride Roach somewhere because he doesn't want to teleport. So that's a pretty good recurring joke. But more or less, yeah, you're right. It's like we talked about, just they made changes that don't make sense. And they hinted at changes that could make sense. And then they decide not to go that route and make it almost unbearable. Yeah. But that's the first part of season 2 of The Witcher. Hopefully you've watched the show and maybe read the books, and you can kind of complain with us through it up to this point. But otherwise, we will be covering episodes 5 through 8 next week. You can follow all of our episodes on pretty much every podcast catcher that exists. I think most of our listeners actually come from Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Sam, if you haven't looked at the data. You can get articles. We try to post things pretty regularly throughout the week on our Facebook page, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. You can email us at elvesringsandnerdythings@gmail.com. I don't check the email. Hopefully you do, Sam. But yeah, that's it for me. Do you have anything else?
That is it for me. We will talk to you next week about the second half of season 2, and we are rapidly approaching the premiere of season 3. And so we will do our best to get our season 3 coverage out there quickly so that you can watch season 3, come up with some of your thoughts, and then engage in a little virtual parasympathetic parasocial relationship with us and join our discussion.
Yeah. And for those who are familiar with Netflix, they kind of dump their episodes all at once. So Sam and I will be releasing episodic every week. We'll cover one episode. So if you're interested in just following along, you can watch an episode, listen to us, watch an episode, listen to us, or you can binge it, however you prefer. But we're going to be releasing them one a week as we go forward. Starting June 29th, I think, is the first release date.
That is the first release date.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.